have my own sharing section. Thank you very much. All right. My name is David Dickens, and I'm the Academic Computing Support Manager at Pepperdine School of Law. And I'm here. I'm going to talk to you about Windows 2000, upgrading to it, what we did, and some other things, just general information about what it takes to upgrade, some information I found looking through Microsoft sites and pro and anti and bug fix sites and things like that. It's a lot of information, and I've tried to pare it down as best I could, but I'm going to just have to go kind of fast. If you have questions, please just go ahead and raise your hand. I might as well deal with them as they come up, as opposed to waiting all towards the end and just dealing with them as the issues come up, because I'm going to move kind of quickly. I said an unflinching look. My part of unflinching is that I'm going to tell you how I messed up. I was going to say all sorts of wonderful things about what we did at Pepperdine, but then I realized my boss is here and I can't fib. And so I decided I would admit defeat on the things I was defeated on, and hopefully you can learn something from that. Your part of the unflinching is trying to keep up as I go along. I'm going to try to not be crazy. Pepperdine, basically, we've got myself and my boss and a lot of student workers. We don't have much when it comes to being able to support a large staff rollout. Some of the student workers are very talented, but they don't have everything that it takes to deal with faculty machines and, more importantly, the faculty as they're upgrading machines. So we're kind of limited in how we have to approach a rollout. We don't have some of the possibilities maybe somebody with a few more people has, or a better ratio of staff for staff support. Hardware-wise, we actually have a pretty good setup. We've got P3 500s in the lab. We've got plenty of RAM. We've got plenty of hard drive space. We had a fairly large purchase last year of computers during the summer, so we pretty much have the best of the line from Dell last summer. For people who don't have that kind of hardware, it's going to be a little more difficult to upgrade to Windows 2000. You're certainly not going to see the benefits that you're going to see if you've got some of the latest hardware. The only encouragement I can give you is the fact that the latest hardware doesn't cost much money anymore. In fact, you can buy the same computers we have for about, well, P3 500s from Dell, if you can even purchase them still. Otherwise, they may be already the 733s and whatnot. You're talking like $1,500. I mean, it's not much money, particularly since you probably already have labs, you have computers you don't need to monitor, and you may even be able to buy them without the keyboard and mouse if you really want to. It depends on whether you're floating computers down from the lab to faculty or whether you float them from the faculty down to the lab. I don't know what your particular style is. We have good relationships with our central campus, but that doesn't mean we have everything we want to have. Some of you may also experience this problem, and some of this is really going to begin to impact things more than it did in the past because of Active Directory, and I'm going to talk about Active Directory a little bit later on, but only briefly because it's very complicated. And of course, we have a Microsoft licensing agreement, so all this stuff is fairly inexpensive to us on a per unit basis because it's already been paid for. Unfortunately, sometimes that means you make some bad choices because you think of the software as, oh, well, we already have this, we might as well use it. Sometimes you're better off trying to find another tool even though you have that licensing agreement. If you don't have that licensing agreement, the upgrade could be expensive. I want to give you a little status summary of what we've done. The things we have completed, well, I've got a lab machine that's perfectly working within our NT environment that's based on 2000, and I'm ready to roll it out to the rest of the lab. And we've got a server that we ran and a temporary domain that we ran. And those all worked very well, but things didn't come out at the schedule I wanted them to come out. I was hoping to come here to CALI and say, I've got my lab done, I've got 2 of the 4 servers done, and we're rolling along and having a great time. In 2000, it didn't work out. The only reason, though, the lab didn't work out is because HP hasn't delivered drivers yet for 2000. This could be a real problem for those of you in labs and whatnot. They don't have 2000 drivers for most of their printer line yet. So I checked the site yesterday. They still don't have any out. I'm still hoping to finish it all by this summer. We'll see if that actually pans out. We've got some other rollouts that we have to do. We do have other projects. We have the Palm project that Phil spoke on earlier. So it's not like the only thing we have our time dedicated to is this. We've still got a lot of work on the website to do. That takes up time. So we don't have everything that we don't have all the time in the world that we'd like to be able to have, but I'm hoping still to complete this by the end of the fall and have it well tested before the fall semester hits. And we have heavy use in the lab and things start to break. I want to talk a little bit about the upgrade process you're going to go through when you think about 2000, whether or not you're going to personally do it, you really need to consider what you need and what 2000 is going to get for you. In some cases, what you need, you already have. Maybe you have an NT network already set up. It serves files. It prints things. You're not looking to do anything more than that. Your web page is basically all just text, and it sits on a web server. It's also an NT box and everything. Everybody's basically happy. You can run Office 2000 on NT with all the extensions and all the fancy gizmoids that some people would like out of Office 2000, Front Page 2000. So going to moving up to the actual operating system may not be something that's even necessary for you until there's more incentive from Microsoft. Maybe in the next version they add some more features that you might find personally are useful for you. You also have to evaluate your equipment very thoroughly. Even though you might think, oh, it's a new machine, oh, I have a good hard drive, I have the latest processor, there's all sorts of subtleties, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on a couple sites you can go to and a couple utilities you can use to make sure that your equipment is capable of running 2000. And of course, you have to do, once you find out the value of your equipment, you have to do a budget evaluation and determine exactly what you're going to have to do to pay for this upgrade, including those equipment costs and the training costs, because it is going to cost you some time. It's very similar to 98, very similar to NT. The interface is, in fact, it's basically a merger of the two features you're familiar with. So you don't have a big training problem like you might have going originally to 95 from 3.1, but there still is that concern. And of course, based on that, is it a benefit to you? Are you really going to get something out of it? Is this an upgrade you can pass over? Maybe it is. Maybe you can wait till the next version. Maybe you can wait till the next budgetary opportunity to buy more equipment. A lot of us live on the one-time only expense route, and we don't have yearly or guaranteed bi-yearly or tri-yearly upgrades on our machines. You just kind of have to wait for the next windfall to come in. Current pricing, this is I got from the computer store a couple days ago, and this is what everything's at right now. Typical prices from Microsoft, everything's up about 20 to 23% from previous pricings. The big deal is that Exchange and SQL are changing their pricing structure. So if you do use those, they're changing from a per user, per instance licensing technology to a per CPU licensing system. So those prices are actually going to change very quick. Those are for Exchange 5, 5, and SQL 7. When they go to 2000, when those go to version 2000, they'll change. So, but there's some prices for you. There are different ways you can migrate. You can take the migration by inches approach. 2000 is very flexible to this. Basically, as a machine gets old and you can't use it, you can buy a new machine that has 2000 on it and stick it on your network. All the software you used before, or most all the software you used before, is usable in 2000. It works fine, file sharing, printing, all those sorts of things. You don't have to do anything new. The same IDs work, the same profiles might have a bit of a problem. I attempted to convert some NT profile material into 2000 profile material, and it works on an individual machine, but we have a network where we run roaming profiles, allowing students to log in anywhere and still maintain their user settings. If you do that, you're stuck forcing all their profiles to go to some sort of default, again, resetting them all to some default profile you build in 2000. As opposed to trying to convert theirs to 2000, it doesn't change over properly. You can do it by feet. You can do by departments, or take the workstations first, and then go back once you've got all your workstations running 2000, and people are using the new ease of use features and whatnot like that. Then you can go back to your servers and take them one at a time and build them up. And I would suggest doing your faculty machines last. Your faculty you're going to spend more time on than your staff or your lab anyway, at least per machine. And it'll give you a lot more time to have the environment out there. You can see how people at your school are reacting to the challenges and the differences of the new operating system before you attack your faculty with a new operating system. Or you can migrate by tactical nuclear device. That's really a matter of financials. Sometimes you get a lot of money. Sometimes money comes in, and you've got to take advantage of it now, and you may not have a choice. And if you've got the money coming in, it's probably a good idea to take advantage of it. If you don't do it now, you're waiting until next year in the summer, probably waiting until the next year. Maybe the money's gone. I don't know. I don't know how your budgetary systems work, but if you have the opportunity to take advantage of a large windfall, it's not a bad idea. You just have to take special preparations to do that. because it does take time. My suggestion would be, I guess, to take a weekend probably and prepare everything. Set up the servers so that they're ready. Test each one. Take a fake machine somewhere in a corner. Install it like one of the servers that you're currently using. Upgrade it to 2000. See what happens. If it works okay, and you do that through each of your machines, take a weekend. Convert those servers, and then schedule time, you'd have to do this in advance obviously, with each of your staff members, and have them sit there while you upgrade their machine to 2000. You can talk to them about the changes, you can take advantage of that time. It's not that much difference from NT, but still there are some bits and pieces, and you can make them feel more comfortable. If you do that, you probably have enough time in a week with a staff of 4 or so to convert most of a law school that way, and you can do it with them. As I said, it commingles nicely with NT, so you're not going to have any problems there. Migrating always proposes some opportunities to us. We can re-engineer. We can take this opportunity that since we're already going to have to go through this entire process of rebuilding our machines, we might as well take a look at our topology. Are our resources in the right places? Are they in the best places? Are they easiest organized? What are the services we're providing, like print services? Maybe we've been thinking, man, the load on that print server, like in our case, we use our print server also to house an archival copy of all the software we install on machines. And when someone is installing Office 2000 from our print server, and a whole bunch of people are trying to print at the same time, it's a heavy load. So maybe it's time to take a look at that and say, okay, I have the time since I'm rebuilding these machines, I'm going to move the archives of software somewhere else. It also is a good opportunity to take a look at security again, particularly because of Active Directory. Active Directory is a wholly different way of going about securing your network from the point of view of the users and the management. And you may find that it's a good opportunity for you to look through those things and determine whether you have met the needs of both yourselves and your users. It's also an opportunity for new ideas. Different ways of doing things. Active Directory is different. I don't happen to like it personally. I think it's a lot of hoopla and a lot of goop and a lot of extra trouble, not extra help for me. I know they did it because it is point and click easier, that is, for your average network administrator. But for someone who's actually designing a network, it doesn't really give you the flexibility that they say it gives you. It kind of ties you down. And of course, I see application obsolescence as an opportunity. I used to have to deal with a particular piece of software that only ran under DOS, only ran on a 5 1/4, and that 5 1/4 had to be the A drive in a machine. This didn't happen at the law school. It happened when I worked at the business school. And the professor insisted that that software was critical to the curriculum. When we upgraded 95 and the software would no longer work, my job was made much easier. So I didn't have to ever say no. That was very helpful. You want to go through a pretty solid checklist when you're upgrading. You want to check all your BIOS updates. Even if you have a new machine, I mentioned before, some things don't work the way you think they will, and that you really need to get the latest BIOS that's available from your manufacturer. This should probably also say check for any problems with your motherboard. Someone mentioned to me the other day that there are actually some motherboards that 2000 just doesn't work on. I don't know whether it's a chipset or something like that. And you're going to want to check with your manufacturer on that. Don't trust Microsoft to know your hardware. They have utilities, and I have a couple links later on. You can run the utilities, you can take a look, but check with your hardware manufacturer. The thing I was talking about before is the Readiness Advisor, and it tells you, it runs through your machine, checks the various different software. Basically, it just sees if it matches their list. It doesn't actually test anything at all. They just have a big list of hardware and a big list of software, and gee, does your stuff fit. And of course, just like you check with your hardware providers, check with your software providers. Microsoft stuff you'd think would work, but maybe some of the older software won't. I don't know if you still have people using Microsoft Mail or something like that around there. It probably won't function. I know a lot of that stuff isn't even Y2K compatible, so you may not have it anyway. Make sure you exceed the minimum requirements, and I'm going to give you the minimum requirements in just a second. Make sure the CD-ROM accepts a bootable CD. It is so much easier to not boot off a floppy to install Windows 2000. It is so much faster. Just convenience. Back up your data twice. I don't know how you guys store your data, but I do everything I can not to store my data on workstations. We try to have people with user drive on the network so their data is backed up and stored and located away from any fallout that may happen when we upgrade a machine. And print out your pre-installation hardware settings. That's always useful. You may find that Windows 2000 does not detect your hardware properly, and you may need to manually adjust some things. You may also find that you have to go back to Windows NT, and you have to do it from scratch, reinstall to do that. You cannot uninstall Windows 2000. And after your installation, go to windowsupdate.microsoft.com. If you guys don't go there regularly already, and if you're lab administrators, you're already digging yourself a hole. This is the only place where Microsoft admits mistakes. Well, I guess their support files kind of admit mistakes, but so this is the only place I know to go to make sure I've got all the things that I need to make sure my machine works the best it can. Always make careful note of the administrative password when you set up a 2000 machine. If you're used to using 98, this is NT based. That means you have to log in when you sit down. You don't have an opportunity not to. And so if you don't know what your administrator password is, you are not going to get access to that machine to be able to install critical services. So make sure to make note of that. The prerequisites from them, that is Microsoft, Pentium 2, 166, 64 megs of RAM, 685 megabytes of hard disk space. If you have NT installed on your machine and you're upgrading, or 95 and you're upgrading, you need a lot more disk space than that. A lot more. You want to have networking. You want to make sure the hardware compatibility list matches. Display. They actually recommend an 800 by 600 display, but that's fine on a workstation. I would, on a workstation, I'd even prefer a better display than that. Don't you dare put an 800 by 600 display or a 1024 by 768 display on a server. 90% of the problems you're going to run into will be fixed by reinstalling video drivers. It's really bad. Always run your servers in 640 by 480. Some of the dialog boxes are too big to fit on a screen that size. Yes, that's a pain. The best thing you can do is try to do as much as you can remotely on those servers. Video problems with NT-based products go a long, long way back. I recommend the Pentium 3500. It's not that expensive anyway. In fact, in some cases, you can't even buy them in computer lines anymore. But that's a really good base to work from. You'd have to have a really high-end Pentium 2 to feel comfortable with 2000 on your machine, and you certainly won't see the performance enhancements, and I do mean there's performance enhancements. My machine runs faster under 2000 than it did under NT, but that's because I've got a Pentium 3500 with 256 megs of RAM and a huge hard drive. I say 4 gigs of disk space, and I mean it takes up a lot of space. If you're building a lab configuration, you can do vanilla. Just install everything where Microsoft says, this is the default, this is the default, this is the default. That's fine. But I'd suggest on a server or a power user station, like I have on my own machine, I actually separate the partitions on my machine. I have a 2 gig system partition. I use about 60% of it, floating 60 to 70% of it, just for the system. I then have a separate partition for programs, and I have a separate partition for my data. I try to install everything that the software will allow me to install on the program's partition. Anything that'll work that way, I do. It really saves you a lot of trouble later on, particularly with swap files. You want to probably put your swap file on your program's partition. Why on your program's partition? Because your system partition and your data partition change size rapidly. If you have some piece of software, let's say you run a database on a server, and you've decided for whatever reason to set that database so that it can grow as it needs to grow. If you have a swap file location on that same drive, you can run out of space for your swap file real fast if the database gets out of hand. And it happens. It happens in the simplest things. I've got a wonderful printing management software called Uniprint, and whenever certain kinds of errors, which repeat themselves constantly, can really fill up the database very fast. They don't have any protection in there for repeating errors. And so if something goes wrong, sometimes you get a ping every second or 2 or 3 times a second, and it'll create a new record in the database, and it can blow it up really fast overnight, particularly if you come in on a Monday morning and can't figure out why your system is running. If you have the opportunity to put your drives, and this is specifically on a server, on these partitions on separate drives, or even better, on separate drives that aren't on the same controller, you're really going to see a performance benefit. It's a serious performance benefit. It's the ability to handle the data is much better. You can upgrade from both 98 and NT, whereas NT was not 95 or 98 upgradable. 2000 is. It converts the registry very well. It's They say you can upgrade from 3.5.1. Do not upgrade from 3.5.1. Microsoft's, if you go to support.microsoft.com and you look through their own support files, you'll find that upgrading from 3.5.1 is just fraught with peril. There's all sorts of problems that people are having. They should say that you can't upgrade from it. I don't know how. You won't end up with a functional machine. Also, consider your IIS version for your web server. Do not upgrade any IIS version but 4.0 to the 5.0, which comes as a service now in Windows 2000. The nice thing about upgrading from Windows 98 is it does actually work. There are a few things that have problems. One of the things that has problems, which is maybe not a problem, is that American Online doesn't work. It's basically because it installs its own network adapter. Anything you have that installs your own network adapter, anything which interferes with what Microsoft calls the HAL, the hardware abstraction layer. So all sorts of device drivers that are very specific you can have problems with when you update from 98 to NT. One thing, I don't know if I have this later on a slide, I've forgotten, but I want to make sure I mention it. Some things do update really well. One of those things, which you couldn't do for those of you who do recreational activities on your computer, is install DirectX drivers. Windows 2000 will support all forms of DirectX. So for those of you who always thought that the OpenGL version of Quake was just not fast enough, you can install your game drivers on there. It is a video performance increase. I don't know for us what else we would have that for. We're not engineers. When you're going to upgrade, you may have several different topologies on your network, and I just want to go through a couple of different ones here. An NT single domain is where you just have a primary domain controller and maybe a couple backups or whatever, and all of your computers are running NT or 98 and log into that system. There's one set of accounts, and you use all that one set of accounts from that PDC. When you upgrade it to 2000, you can keep that same model. I'm going to talk about some reasons why you don't want to include Active Directory. And in fact, I'm not going to include Active Directory if I can avoid it for a while at least. But basically, you can just migrate that whole system. You don't have to make any changes to your security setup. It looks very similar. The only difference is instead of having what they call a primary domain controller, they've separated the various domain activities, like being a browse server or being a account server, into separate services, and you can divide those amongst different machines to share the load. For most of us, that won't matter. You're going to set up a machine just like you always did. You're going to have a primary, and you're going to have backups that just listen and follow the primary's orders. You may have a trusted domain model. This is what we have at Pepperdine. And many of you may have this as well if you do a lot of work with your central IT department on your campus. If you're lucky, they trusted your domain. They may not have. It took us a while, and Phil definitely deserves the credit for that. If you have a trusted domain model, you can upgrade it into what they call an Active Directory tree. Tree is one of the terms, and a forest is a group of trees, and good Lord, you can make a big mess out of the whole thing. The idea is just they just set another hierarchy on top of the domain model that you're familiar with if you've been administrating NT, so that you can take domains, put them together, those domains form a tree, and you put trees together and form a forest. This is supposed to be not unlike a Kerberos. In fact, they claimed to use Kerberos 5 in 2000, and it's supposed to be able to trace the Kerberos key every time you do a login, so that you have single login to all resources. Doesn't quite work that way. I will say that Windows 2000 does work much better when you're trying to access a resource that doesn't use your username to do it. Sometimes I find myself as an NT admin, I log in as myself. Maybe I don't have access to everything because I don't want to use my administration ID for just writing documents and things. But all of a sudden I realize, oh man, I got to get a new version of X software, or I'm running out of space on Y server and I have to rip some stuff off. Sometimes if you try to connect to a machine in NT, once it had given you an ACL, an access control list, you were stuck with it. And you tried to access these other resources, and they just said, no, I'm sorry. And if you wanted to access them, you had to log completely out of the system, log completely back in. With 2000, you can actually assign any connection you make a different ID and password. So I can connect to a machine and just type in a completely different ID and password, and it will give me the authentication of that. And it won't say, what's that phrase it keeps saying? This conflicts with the current set of security credentials, I believe, is what the message you usually get if you try to do that in NT. You don't get that problem in 2000. I did say I was going to talk about Active Directory, but there's really too much information to talk about. I hate to say that, but it really is true. It's just monstrous. It's a whole different way of operating security in your network. You're probably better off consulting with your central IT department to find out what they want to do. They may not know what they want to do. I know our central IT department doesn't know what they want to do at this point either. And I'm not saying that as a negative thing on them. This is a big deal. It's a completely different way of running the security of your network. For right now, don't do it. That's my suggestion. You might be an Active Directory expert and already have played with it before when they tried to implement it in NT in 98. You may feel very confident with some of the new technologies they're doing, but I just feel like I can't touch it with a 30-foot pole. When I first saw Windows 2000, I said, Windows 2000 Professional, what's that? Is there a regular version of Windows 2000? I have no idea. No, there are 4 different versions of Windows 2000, Professional, Server, Advanced Server, and Data Center Server. Maybe one of you is lucky enough out there to have to run Advanced Server. Pretty much everybody in the world can handle Professional and Server. Professional is the replacement for Workstation, and Server is the replacement for Server in the line, but it includes a lot of tools that were only included in NT for the Enterprise, in Windows NT 4.0 Enterprise Edition. Things like DHCP services, DNS services, and those sorts of things. So they've taken those things out of the Enterprise Edition and moved them down into the Server Edition as regular standard NT services. Advanced Server basically is supposed to improve the amount of memory you can have, improve the ability to cluster large numbers of machines together, and Data Center is just simply more so. I don't know if anybody ever told you guys this, but there was a hack on the net to take Windows NT Workstation and turn it into Windows NT Server. The hack was a registry change and a couple of other minor hidden file changes. It was the same code on the CD, Server, Workstation. Guess what? Same thing. All the same code. They're just going to charge you a lot more for changing the registry. Not that I'm advocating you change it on your own. I'm just saying it is the same code. There are other things that they include on the server, the Advanced Server, and Data Center Server, CDs, utilities, and whatnot. You'll notice I mentioned up there 2-proc with OEM, HEL, and 4-proc processors. Professional supports 2 processors. The number on the right, what I'm referring to is if you have your own HAL that's been given to you by your OEM. The funny thing is, if you right now have a machine, let's say running Windows NT Server, and it has 8 processors, and you've gotten a compact fix to be able to make that work, if you upgrade it to Windows 2000, you will continue to be able to use those 8 processors. If you wipe the machine and reinstall, it knocks you down to 4. So, make sure you get a really good backup of your machine before you install, because you're not going to want to go back to this machine and reinstall it from scratch. You're going to lose all those capabilities. I want to make a side note here. Welcome back to Disk Defrag. Microsoft has a very bad sense of humor. They said NTFS doesn't need defragmenting. Of course, we all know that it did need defragmenting. In fact, our servers often got fragmented far faster than our workstations did. But it's back now. They've admitted defeat, I guess. The things that you've got in Windows 2000 Professional. We've got an add and remove hardware wizard. For those of you who really couldn't figure out why in the world they didn't include the dumb dialog box from Windows 95 in Windows NT 4.0, they finally included it. I think they just weren't ready with the little dialog box. I have no idea why they didn't do it. But and it does have full plug-and-play support. One of the things it also does, and I mentioned this with the DirectX before, is it supports the Win32 driver model. In theory, any Windows 98 driver should also work in Windows 2000. So why can't I install the 98 drivers for my HP printers? Well, it only works if you upgrade from Windows 98. almost all drivers that are listed as 98 drivers, when you try to install them, when they tell the system that I'm a 98 driver, Windows 2000 won't accept them. You can't use them to install hardware. If you had 98 on the machine, installed it on 98, and then upgraded, Windows 2000 takes them all just fine, but it won't do it later on. There are some better power options as well. It does handle some power control better for things like laptops. It manages power much better than Windows NT did. Windows NT really wasn't meant to sit on anyone's laptop. It was really not for that. They've tried to make 2000 fit. The only problem being, of course, it takes up 4 gigs of hard drive space and huge RAM requirements and all this sort of thing. Luckily, they're less expensive these days, so it's not going to be too big of a problem. As I mentioned, Workstation Features, I should say, professional features. They do have an advanced power configuration. Allows you basically to pull devices out of your laptop and put them back in, or in your desktop machine without having to turn it off and reboot. Wow, some way to not reboot in Microsoft. And Network Connections Wizard, the idea is just to simplify your ability to set up all your network parameters. It's not that exciting. Virtual private network support, which is kind of nice if you're someone who has to deal with people connecting over the internet from long distances who want to keep their data secure. I don't know how much that means so much to your professors per se, but it may mean a lot to students who are eventually going to work in the private sector where privacy within law firms is a real concern. And if you're trying to create that environment in your lab, like as if they were in a legal partnership and they were having to work within the tools that were available to a law firm, adding virtual private network support is probably a good direction to go in for certain kinds of connections. It does have offline folders and a synchronization manager. If you used IE and you spend a lot of time browsing on the web, it's kind of nice sometimes if you're running away with your laptop to download a whole bunch of pages and then read them later on. That's kind of convenient, but this is not just for that. You can actually download those same things off of the network and synchronize network files. It can dynamically store data on your own hard drive. When your hard drive starts to get full, it can toss information onto the network. When you're thinking about being away from the network, it can cache information on your local hard drive, just like those web pages were cached. It's also got Internet Printing Protocol, which allows you basically to print to any URL. The problem with this is, of course, all of your printers happen to be web. I don't know if you guys know this, but most of your HP printers, laser printers, laser jets, they're all web servers. You can get to all the configuration in your web servers. If you start using stuff like IPP, you have to start worrying about what you're going to do about direct printing to those things. Right now, the security we have is that everybody only knows how to print to the print server because that's where the printer is, right? Well, the reality is they're all available on our IP network, and if you start making things available to people, they might start realizing that they could print from home, other internet connections, to your lab printers. You might want to think about segmenting your printers off. You might want to think about plugging them directly into a machine instead of having the server in the physical presence of the printers, off of at the LPT port, something to connect those. That's mostly just the security wasn't there, but they didn't know about it. Now we're going to start to connect to URLs and print to URLs, and they're going to start to realize that this is a facility that they can do, and your users might get smart on you and cause you some problems with overprinting. 2000 server, of course, I mentioned before, Active Directory services. That seems very repetitive, but that's what they call it. It's ADDS. Configuration and management, there's a management console that they add with group policies, network system management, including Windows Script Host, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Terminal services, so that you can run thin terminals if you want to. That's really your own choice. We've had a test group trying to run something like that in the main campus library, and they've had some success, some difficulty. It's a bit heavy on network. That's on the network topology. There's too much bandwidth for a lot of that stuff, but you may have different circumstances. And of course, they've got remote installation stuff. Basically, this is a replacement for what a lot of us use SIS for. If you ever used SMS, I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind. If you ever pushed applications before, this is a much easier way to push the installation of applications. In fact, you can push the installation of Windows 2000 to a machine this way. This is not the way I recommend doing it, though. There are much better tools than using their tools. As far as getting the Windows 2000 on a machine, maybe upgrading their Office later on, it's fine, but I wouldn't do it for the actual upgrade of the machine. As I said, Active Directory services, Microsoft Management Console, Group Policy, Remote Installation Services. I wrote here as well, SIS, it's SMS. This is supposed to be a feature. But I spoke with some people earlier today, and and I checked a couple websites before I came in here, and I found out that Dynamic DNS, which is a service available with NT, is really, really, really bad. It basically just it creates a denial of service attack on your local other DNS servers. It hammers them. Basically, the concept behind this whole thing is, in this new Active Directory world, this new Windows 2000 world, is we're going to drop all these WINS names, we're going to drop all these NetBIOS names, we're going to run everything on DNS. Obvious problems that come to mind? Well, let's see, I got a student who comes in who wants to use their 2000 laptop on my network. Do I want them to have Joe Schmo at .pepperdine.edu? I have to give them that, I think. I haven't been able to find a way to prevent that. That is the naming service. If they want to share files, if I want to connect to them, that is the way you name their machine. And of course, because you can take these machines and set them down and log in and remove them, and the IP may be served up via DHCP in a random sort of fashion, or a cache sort of fashion, they had to make the DNS also dynamic. So you got a server that's constantly inundating other DNS servers around it with new DNS data. It's bad. Take DNS, run it on a Linux box, point everything to that. It's just not worth it. Not worth the trouble. Terminal services, as I mentioned before. Distributed file system. The attempt behind this is simply to give your users a single place to get everything that they want, everything they need to find. Your mileage may vary on that particular usefulness. We do finally have disk quotas in NT 2000, or Windows 2000, which is a welcome addition. Things in Advanced Server, well, Advanced Server's got advanced memory architecture and Windows clustering, and Data Center supports more of the same. But they're just the same technology, they just have different switches. Some good stuff. Windows 2000 SysPrep. For those of you who are like myself, who like to image drives for a lab, SysPrep is very, very nifty. Because currently, apart from the problem with the SID of the machine, if those of you are knowledgeable in OT security, you know what I mean there. It's the number identifier of a machine that you never see, but the computers all use to identify that machine. If you use that image to copy to all the lab machines, that SID, of course, gets copied to all lab machines, and that can cause some problems on your network, mostly security problems. SysPrep actually removes the SID. It also removes any identifying marks to the machine. That is, the username that was associated with, what would have been the NetBIOS name, the computer name, the domain it's sitting on. All that stuff gets stripped out. So what you end up doing is, you sit down to a machine, you install the stuff the way you want, you run SysPrep, turn off the machine. Then do your image. The next time you start up any computer with that image on it, it's going to ask you the same information that it would ask you if you had just purchased a machine from like an OEM. Say, who are you? Do you log into a network? What's the domain? And you give it that information.
When you run that, does it take the information off the server too?
No, it only runs. You run this locally on the workstation. So
you have to remove the computer name from the server.
You could do that. I don't know whether 2000. I know NT. You had a problem if another machine tried to grab a name that was already pre-existing. I don't know even if that other machine wasn't on. I don't think 2000 has a similar problem. I would still do it. I would still go into my domain and rip out all the names, or rip out the name of the machine I used to start up. Because when you come back up, you're not going to use that same name again. It almost is kind of inconsequential, because what you're going to do is use whatever name you want to name each one of your lab machines.
The machine you're making the image from, you run SysPrep, it's taking all that information.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, when you reboot the machine, even when you reboot your sort of ideal lab machine or whatever it is, when you reboot it, it's going to come up with the same set of questions. And so, I guess you won't have a problem. You can just enter the same name again.
The machine's name is Adam. It's there in the.
It's still Adam, and you could, when you log in, it'll just ask you what the computer name is. You put Adam in again, you're right back into where you were before.
Even though it doesn't have the same SID number.
Yeah, you would have a problem, wouldn't you? Yeah, you are stuck. You're gonna have to remove from the domain, which of course gives you a 15-minute or 30-minute pause or so, depending upon how fast your domain refreshes on that stuff. So that is a good point. It's a very good point. Be careful with SysPrep in general, but it is a really good tool because you're going to be able to roll out those machines a lot faster. I remember the best thing I could do was try to log in, can't log into the domain, okay, log in locally as administrator, then try to log in the domain, then change the computer name. Sometimes you had to reboot 2 or 3 times to get the NT machine to be happy. Now you're not going to have to do that. You log in once, you're good to go. As I mentioned before, the Windows Installer Service really is cool for applications. They've got an upgrade compatibility verification tool. That's a lot of words and a lot of syllables. Again, it's just stuff on Microsoft's website. I'm going to point you to a little later on so you can check. Increased hardware support. There is more support than there was in NT. The add remove hardware wizard like Windows 95. The driver model. Plug and play support. I am running a little bit over time, as I thought I would. So I want to jump to a couple things real quick so you can have some opportunity here to go have lunch. One of the things I would suggest is IC3 ImageCast. It's like Ghost. You may have used Ghost. I think there's another one called Disk Image out there. The nice thing about IC3 is that I can take the machine, I hit SysPrep, I turn it off, I stick a disk in the disk drive of the machine, start it up. I have IC3 ImageCast sitting on my computer that I'm running the network from. I have a disk installed in my lab image machine. I go around and boot every one of my lab machines with a similar disk. Basically all it does is set them up as just open clients waiting to hear from IC3. I then multicast from that machine to all the other machines on the subnet that I want. Broadcast them all at the exact same time with the exact same image. It broadcasts the whole disk at once, so all the partitions and everything that you want to have set up on the machine. Boom, done. Of course, don't forget to use SysPrep and act like an OEM because it's fun. Let's see here. There's a couple of new features that I wanted to mention otherwise. Some of you may find some of these things useful. They have encrypted file system now available. It's transparent encryption. This is probably most useful for like your faculty members who have really, or at least they believe they have really sensitive data on their machines, and you may have student workers that work on those machines. Sometimes you have to give those student workers administrative access on that machine to be able to install the drivers they need to install. But of course, you don't want to let them see the various different things on there that may belong to the professor, and with the administrative access they can. You can use encryption on your system. It's transparent. The user never sees it. It's attached to the particular user ID. The only bad thing is administrators can't get to it. It could also be a problem. And if you go around deleting IDs, someone made a mistake and goes into your domain and deletes an ID, so the key that's created, the X.509 version 3 certificate that's created is also gone and unavailable to anybody. So be careful. It's good usefulness. It's very good for data recovery as well, to store if you want to store a lot of material securely on a server. Be careful with web services. I'm trying to get to my next. Oh, I might as well mention what I failed at while I'm here. Since I'm trying to rush through things, I shouldn't rush through this. I made a mistake. I did not realize that when you upgrade to 2000 from NT, it resets all your security settings. That stuff sits in your registry. It doesn't sit with the files. If you have various security settings set up on different directories and subdirectories, you may have a very complicated setup on your website. Some people are allowed to edit this directory, other people's that directory, that directory, all this stuff. Guess what? You better write all that stuff down because it's going to wipe it out. Even if you do an upgrade, not just a blank install, obviously. There's another weird problem with the permissions on the website. If you run the permissions wizard for website, you have to be careful because there's a new way of running inherited permissions, that is permissions which come from the directory which they sit in, the files sit in. You can end up making your website unable to be connected to by anyone because of the way these inherited security settings work. There's a correction for this on Microsoft's website, and I'm going to point you to that on my last slide. So there's a couple things you can write down there, but basically you have to change the permissions on that. Proxy server won't work, and front page server extensions are not supported in clustering servers. I don't know how many of you will be clustering servers. Printing with HP, I don't have a lab full of 2,000 computers because they don't have drivers yet. And I was really hoping to have that done. And I still don't know what I'm going to do about student laptop support. The only thing I can think of is to create a separate domain, find that some little piece of junk computer that I'm just going to install NT, make it a primary domain controller, and trust it. Have no user IDs in that domain, but give students computer IDs in that domain. The reason why I say make a separate domain, because guess what happens if you let them be a part of your domain, their computer be part of your domain? They have access to the SAM. And what do? They go bring down back Orifice or whatever, download some tool on the net. They take your SAM home because they have access to it because they're a part of your NT domain. They can grab it, go home, and crack the SAM. And have access to everything. And your students may not be that malicious, but I don't know how many people come in and go out, and how many people you may have used it on a temporary basis, or you get a student who gets failed. I don't know. You may have just a disgruntled person, and it is script kiddie kind of problems. Anybody can just download this stuff. Boom. Training stuff, because I know that's going to matter. I suggest with faculty, you do it with seminars, do it in groups. They tend to take training better with each other in a team sort of effort. It's a lot easier, probably even better also to bring in professional trainers from outside the university. It's a lot easier for them to see somebody who's wearing a special shirt with a special logo that says, I'm really good at Windows and I'm going to teach you how to do it, than maybe Joe Tech, who was underneath their desk yesterday trying to make sure the network connection was working. This is just, the way you play it to your faculty members. Some are more interested than others. It's really not that much different, but it does look somewhat different, and it might throw some of them off. Obviously, dean support is important, and the continuity. If you haven't been supporting your faculty well, you're already in trouble. If you haven't been showing them how to use NT or 98 in ways that are more than just, I know how to hit the print button, you've already got other problems that you're going to have to work with. Staff is different. I actually think that you're better off give them a computer training disk. Give them access to some online training. Let them explore it on their own. You just don't have the time to spend on the staff members in that way. And maybe you go back later on and you do, you have a specific task. You have to do that particular thing. Let me sit down with you one-on-one, and we'll get you through that task. You can write all the steps down, and you'll be okay. You're probably better off. Always make sure you develop lots of facts and how-tos on different topics. It makes people feel really good to have a piece of paper sitting next to them so they can refer to it, particularly when something's new to them. You can use this with Unix. Microsoft has just put out NT services for Unix 1.0. It basically supplies Unix services from an NT box. Telnet services, plain text passwords. Be careful with Telnet. Friends don't let friends use Telnet. NFS drives, things like that. You may find that you don't want to make your Microsoft machines look like Unix machines. You may want your Unix machines to look like Microsoft machines. In that case, you've got Samba. If you use Samba, probably the best thing you can do is make your PDC ONX box. The reason why is because then you can do all your accounting on the Unix box, and it gets replicated out to all the NT boxes. It's a little more difficult to get the replication to work the other way. That is, to have local accounts on the NT box which you are able to access because you have an ID it can get to Samba. Traditionally, that's the way I've read it to be better. Several of the books on Samba recommend either as a PDC or as a standalone, not as a backup domain controller. Do not trust Microsoft. Kerberos 5.0 is not in Windows 2000. Something they like to call Kerberos 5.0 is in Windows 2000. It has all sorts of crazy things which basically make it impossible to use Kerberos with Unix machines. Period. It doesn't work. The Kerberos only works with other 2000 machines. No exceptions on that one, unfortunately. I haven't seen a patch. I haven't seen a fix. That's a big one. So don't depend upon Kerberos and think you're going to finally get one login for all your resources. As far as their interoperability commitments, well, that's up for grabs. They're just trying to make sure that no one yells and screams at them. Interoperability is not very far, even at the way Microsoft describes it. This is their definition of interoperability. And they basically say, oh, well, they can kind of sit next to each other in a room, and maybe you can occasionally use data on one and on the other, but nothing's actually going to work between them. This is going to change, though. I don't know if you all heard, but Microsoft is releasing Microsoft.net, and they're going to take all their software and turn it into XML applications. So it'll run anywhere. What does this mean? This means Microsoft is going to try to copyright large volumes of XML. And if you write something neat in XML, they're going to buy it from you until they own it all. I have no idea about Novell. Does anyone here use Novell who's tried it on 2000? They say it works better. They say it's much easier to use and that they have better support for it, yada, yada, yada. I have no idea what the reality is. We don't have Novell anymore at the university. We got rid of it as part of our Y2K setup, and we just went to NT basically. We had an old version of Novell. We thought we could either upgrade this and pay a lot of money, or since we were putting NT on everything anyway, just go to NT, and that's what we did. Windows Script Host is really cool. It allows you to parse XML applications. It's basically just an exe that sits on a machine. It supports all sorts of different applications. You can use a VB script, JavaScript, NT shell script. You can actually add your own interpreters, Perl. If you have made up, if you developed your own scripting language, that's just fine. You just tell XML where to find the executable to manage that scripting code, and it will take anything because it parses those XML applications. The coolest thing is, finally, NT people have full API access. I can write a script to open Word, click on the File menu, select open, select a particular document in a particular, actually like as if I was clicking on it right in front of the user if I want to, or I can hide the whole thing so they can't see it happening. The coolest thing I thought about just the other day, I was like, isn't it annoying when you've got 40 documents in a directory and you want to print them all? And if you try to select them all and hit print, it opens up 40 copies of Word and crashes your machine. So how about a little script that opens up each one at a time? Goes to File menu, hit print. Go to File menu, hit print. Go to File menu, hit print. It works right directly with the API. I can type on a user screen. I can change window sizes. I can interact with anything you can interact with in the GUI through a script host. I really recommend O'Reilly's book on Windows Script Host for that stuff. It's mostly a book on VB script, but it does have application to all the other stuff. It's not evil, even though it is the cause of the I Love You virus. That is not a technical virus. That is not. I like to say that viruses are not a technical problem; they're a user problem. People need to not learn to click on things so that they don't know why they got them. Some goals for Pepperdine. I'm going to have the lab PCs done by the end of the year. I'm going to have my web server done by the end of the fiscal year, the end of this next month. I'm going to move my BDC, a backup domain controller, with a print server over, and I'm going to move select staff members over. I think I'm going to put off my primary domain controller because I don't want to mess with the Active Directory situation. I think I'm going to put off the faculty as well. They just went through a big upgrade last year to go to NT in the first place, and I don't know if all of them have the hardware that's capable of running 2000 on their machine. And we'll just go through a school year floating the 2000 out there, see the problems. I'd rather run into a problem on a staff machine than on a faculty machine anyway. We'll work through those problems, and we'll have a much better perfected system in the end. So, just some notes up here. It's a little small. This is going to be up on the website, so you can get then some places, some things that you might like. Windows 2000 Script Host from O'Reilly, Samba 2.0 from O'Reilly. Computer-based training or online training for staff is probably a really good directive. Mastering Computers, which is now Platinum Computing, has some pretty good stuff on that. Subscription to TechNet. Why don't you have a subscription to TechNet? If you go to sites online, you read their stuff. Why not at least give Microsoft the opportunity to warn you when they think that they've got a problem. TechNet's only $300. It tells you more things than you ever wanted to know about the software you have. There's more there than is in the support.microsoft.com database. It's more friendly to being searched and much more useful. Plus, you get support from them as well. You can call them up. I don't know how many calls you get with the TechNet subscription, but you do get a couple, I believe. And since the calls are $100 a piece for a minor problem, you're getting your money back pretty fast. BugNet, Windows2000magazine.com. Sometimes they're a little, they like Microsoft a bit too much. If you like a little more reserved opinion, go to W2KWorld.com. Go weekly to WindowsUpdate.Microsoft.com. Trainability is a good place to go too. They have free stuff. They're really like a training company, but they have a lot of interesting resources in their free directory.
There's another one called Leap IT.
Leap IT?
Yeah, they do a lot of streaming with the media player. You can learn anything.
Cool. Microsoft, there's a couple of upgrade sites here. Upgrade paths for 95, 98, Windows 2000, 4.0, compatibility sites. If you're going to upgrade IAS, you're going to want to read Q250979 before you do that upgrade. And of course, I also have a link to a Gartner study on reclaiming your money and value out of 2000. So that might also be useful for some of you. That's it, unless anyone has any questions that I can answer for them.
So the URL in the chat, you do the installation, and URL checks your installation, see if everything is there.
WindowsUpdate.Microsoft.com. Go there religiously.
You said you had some problems with the profiles, the switching from 2000. What kind of problems did you see?
Windows 2000 rewrites the security portion of the registry, and so you can end up with all sorts of unintended problems. Like, for example, when I installed it, for some reason, no one but the administrator could run software on the machine. Because
Machines you upgraded? Or?
Machines I upgraded.
Okay.
Really, for the most part, you're really better off, except for your servers, you're really better off just doing a wipeout. Even with your servers, be ready, because it is going to change your security settings. You know, it's a real bad problem. Anybody else? Okay, well, I guess that's the end of the conference. I wish I had something more profound to say for you, but that's the end of my talk, that's for sure. So if you need anything else, you can come up and talk to me. You can always email me. My information will be on the CALI site. So have a good time. Enjoy Chicago.